It's time now for us to take a look back at this week's headline-making stories in our Reporters Rewind. Our guests at the round table are freelance journalist Kelsey Minor. He writes frequently for Fox News and the Huffington Post. We also see him around here from time to time. Also with us is writer, actor, and activist Omar Sharif Jr. And you know this bald-headed beauty, Wallace Ford, who is an Arise News contributor, political blogger, and professor at Medgar Evers College. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having
me. I'm holding down the estrogen representation here at this table. Okay, so a lot to talk about. I want to start off talking about this conflict with Israel, and frankly, the conflict between Israel and Palestine is as old as, and forgive me for this characterization, but as old as Jesus. This has been going on for quite some time. But do you think, I think, Kelsey, I'll start with you, do you think that the public has grown weary? Because it seems every few years there's some conflict and incursion.
Well, I think it depends on who you ask, or, for instance, what demographic of people you're talking to. When I find out that I'm coming on here, I take sort of an unofficial poll to find out if people are really invested in what they're seeing on the news or whatnot. And many of the people, even on the train ride down here, many of the people I ask, so do you know what's going on in Israel, Palestine? Most of them don't know. So I think it just depends on who you ask. If you talk to your average news watcher every day and people who are invested in, say, Middle East and the news, then obviously I think, yes, they are invested.
Yeah, and what is it that you think, Omar, do you think that people don't get? Because not only is it just a conflict between these two groups of people, but it's in an incredibly provocative part of the world.
Certainly, and I'm from Egypt. I'm half Muslim, half Jewish. I've had grandparents who perished in the Holocaust, and on the other side who fought in some of these Arab-Israeli wars. And, you know, even myself, I got a master's in conflict studies in the Israel-Palestine subject from London School of Economics, and I don't even understand how it started, the conflict, or what the resolution is going to be. And I think what's important for reporters to really emphasize is the human aspect of the conflict and how many people are hurting and suffering on both sides.
Yeah, is it to our peril not to underestimate the importance of this conflict?
Absolutely, and I think that's a really important point here, Debbie, because the history shows us that sometimes what seem like localized conflicts, because there's so many other parties that can be involved or get involved, and because we live in a really globalized, internationalized situation right now, that what seems like a local conflict could escalate quite easily. And of course, the United States, being a major supporter of Israel, basically since the country was formed in 1948, is seen as a target by people who oppose Israel as well. So it's not as if we can just sit here and think that we are separated and immune from this dispute. The United States is very much engaged, very much involved, and in this entire process, and perceived as such by the opponents of Israel.
Indeed, and we just cannot forget that it is a domino event of events. It affects so many of the countries in the region, not the least of which Egypt, Jordan, Syria.
And if I might, it's also an outgrowth of colonialism as well. We have to understand that, in point of fact, that there was colonial empires with the British and the Ottoman Empire and all these. It sounds like ancient history, but we're looking at the results of the fact that countries were formed and reformed according to political lines many times, and not necessarily according to whatever the cultural, geographic, or historical lines might have been.
Yes, indeed. I think I'm going to change subjects because we're running short on time and talk about, we all remember Private. He was Bradley Manning when he was sentenced. Now Chelsea Manning, who was sentenced for providing sensitive documents and spending time in the military prison at Fort Leavenworth. He's transgender, and his lawyers have asked the government to pay for his hormone treatment. So my question is very simple. Kelsey, I'll start with you. Should the United States government pay for Chelsea Manning's hormone treatments?
He worked for them, or she worked for them. And so I would say yes, and that simply is the bottom line. She is an employer of the United States government. She's soldiers, served her country. I say yes. I don't see a problem.
Why shouldn't this be considered elective, something that Chelsea has chosen to do that the government shouldn't be obligated to participate in?
Well, the first thing we have to keep in mind is that we should use the correct personal pronouns, and Chelsea is asked to be referred to as her, so let's give her that first basic dignity. But, trans healthcare goes far beyond the whole aspect of prison. It goes beyond, it's not a state right yet. It doesn't exist in most state prisons. It doesn't exist for most people as a healthcare right. So we need to think about that. And if we watch Orange is the New Black, a very popular show, Laverne Cox really personalizes this struggle on that TV show. She's nominated for an Emmy. And I think it's a good example for people to watch and to understand the complexities and nuances of trans people and trans healthcare.
Last 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I don't know that it really matters whether she was or was not a soldier. She's a prisoner in the U.S. prison system, and it's a health issue. And yes, whether if it was cancer or if it was a broken leg or whatever it might be, you deserve the health care that you need. And to me, it's just that simple. And I don't think complicating it because it has to do with gender issues, transgender issues, really is the point.
All right, we'll have to leave it right there. Wallace Ford, Kelsey Minor, Omar Sharif Jr. Thank you all, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You're watching Arise America.